Okay, I think looks like people are gathered and ready. So I'd like to say hello. I'm Martin Capstick, the Managing Director of the North London Waste Authority. We are the client for the North London Heat and Power project, which we'll be talking about today. Thank you very much and a proper welcome. This is the Market Information Day for a series of facilities which are a key part of delivering our overall project. And obviously I'd like to say a welcome to people who are in the room and people who are joining us on the internet. We hope that we'll provide lots of information and provide the opportunity for questions to ensure that you understand and are interested in the work that we are commissioning. My first duty is to do the housekeeping. So starting off with the fire alarm. For those in the room, no fire alarm is planned. In the event of a fire alarm, we exit through that door there, down the stairs, and the muster point is Ensley Road, which is in that side of the building. I've checked it out. You can follow me if the worst happens. Toilets, rather less excitingly, are also through the same door and just on the right. We'd invite you to turn off phones, please, or ensure they're on silent. And the mysterious sign on the top right is to remind me to tell you that some of you have given us your information, your details, and said you're happy for us to share them in line with GDPR regulations. I'm just notifying you that that's what we are likely to do, so that if there's an inquiry into who was interested and who came along today, we can share details of people who've agreed for us to do so. I might just very briefly say a few words about the North London Waste Authority, kind of the best organisation that nobody's ever heard of. We are the second largest waste disposal authority in England. We're responsible for treating the waste of over 2 million people. That's in 7 boroughs in North London, as set out on the slide. In taking forward our duties, we see waste really as a key resource which needs proper managing. If we manage our resources properly, we help preserve them for future generations. So in that context, we're an organisation which promotes the circular economy, encourages recycling, encourages reuse, encourages waste minimisation. With the waste that we've got, we try and make the best use of it by having really good recycling services, and where waste can't be recycled, get the maximum benefit of it through converting it into energy, which then goes onto the grid at the moment and provides an asset to the community in the form of energy. So we're very committed to finding really good solutions and providing excellent services to our residents. The current facility, as we'll talk about, is in need of replacing. So we've got a major project in Edmonton, which is about modernising our treatment centre for waste, constructing a new energy recovery facility. But associated with that are a lot of important other facilities which add up to a complete and effective environmental solution. And it's principally those elements of the project that we're going to be talking about today. I think this is just about the end of my introduction, but we've got some far more knowledgeable and exciting speakers for you coming up. First of all, I'll invite my colleague David Cullen, our Programme Director, to provide more context about the project. I'll then invite Matt Ray, our manager for the specific project, to go through the detail of the works about which we are shortly going to market. We're delighted to have Mark Beatty here, the Head of Development and Property at London Energy. London Energy are the current operators of the site and the people who we would be expecting to be the operators of the new facilities we're building. So obviously having the link between client, constructor and operator is absolutely essential. And then I'll also be inviting Ursula Taylor, our Head of Legal and Governance, to talk through detailed procurement and contracting issues. I think if it's okay, we'll aim to kind of push through the presentations and save the questions to the end. If there's something absolutely burning, you can raise them as we're going along, but I think our general preference is to run through the issues. That way you can see them properly in sequence and then take questions at the end. Okay, so I will now hand over to David, and we will hope David's voice lasts for the whole of his session.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, apologies. I am a bit a bit croaky today. I'll try and throw my voice as far as possible. There is one thing I think to add for the people who are on the webinar about questions. I believe that the question asking service is not working. The chat room or whatever it's called. So if people could email their questions through to the info@ email address, we'll deal with them at the end. So that's me. I'm the program director for the NLHPP. Safety is extremely important to us. As a client, we're setting the bar high for safety on this project. We don't want anyone to get hurt. We start all our meetings with a safety moment, and this is a personal example for me of the need to consider behavioural safety in order to really guarantee that we're going to have 0 incidents on our project, and that we cannot rely on procedures alone. One of my previous projects was a major hydroelectric scheme in the mountains of Albania. Associated with that was a road through the mountain gorge, which was meant to have been built by the Albanian government. They were getting nowhere with it, and the client took it over as it was needed in order to deliver the hydro scheme. Although that photograph doesn't do it justice, it's the only one I could find on my phone, the geology and the terrain was extremely challenging, with highly friable rock and heavily faulted. My first day on the project, I stopped work on the road, as I could see that it was absolutely not safe to continue. We redesigned the road. We put procedures in place where contractors were only allowed to work in controlled zones after they had been inspected by a geologist and scaled by alpinists, who are essentially mountaineers with jackhammers, to bring down areas of loose rock. All was proceeding well until, unfortunately, 3 alpinists decided to look at a future work site. They were not authorised to do so. They decided while they were up there they were going to bring down some loose rock, because that's what they enjoyed doing. They initiated a major slip through activating a fault, and ended up, unfortunately, killed in 300 feet down in the river at the bottom of the gorge. I never intend to get a phone call again that informs me that 3 people on my job have been killed. But what can we learn from this? Well, actually, the job was going really well. A job that is planned for safety will have benefits in productivity. I firmly believe that. But procedures and safe working practices are just not sufficient in themselves. Certainly we have to plan for safety. We have to enforce compliance with procedures. But we must not neglect to check the understanding of the people who are going to be putting themselves at risk and carrying out the work. Workers will tend to think things are not going to, the worst is not going to happen to them, and it unfortunately too frequently does. Could we have done more? Of course we could have done more, and that's what we constantly have to ask ourselves. Have we done enough to check that our workers understand and are able to control the risks that they are putting themselves in face of? So a little bit more from me about the project in totality. I know you want to hear more specifically about the EcoPark South project, and we'll get to that as quickly as we can. But a little bit more background about the project and as a client. That is a graphic showing the existing facility, and you can see the red outline of what we call the EcoPark. That's the existing site. That's aerial shot, artist's impression of the new facility. The big grey rectangle in the middle is the finished state after the demolition of the existing energy from waste facility. You can probably gauge that there is not a lot of construction space on site. So hence we have leased an area to the right, which is called a temporary laydown area, and that's currently under construction. That will be available for the use of the EcoPark South contract. What's important to us as a client, successful outcomes for us on this project don't just relate to time and cost and quality, although of course those are extremely important. We want you to help us deliver our vision, and I'll come to that in a minute. I've already maintained our ambition for excellence in health and safety and well-being, and we make no apologies for the fact that this will be a recurring theme through the presentation. It's extremely important, it's essential that operations on the existing site are maintained whilst construction is underway. It is already a busy site. There are a lot of vehicle movements, as you can expect, on a waste management facility. But we have an excellent relationship with LEL, the site operator, who have assisted us in the planning of this project so far, and with whom we will continue to collaborate very closely to make sure that construction and operation are optimised and can work effectively side by side. It's also very important to us that and the project is a positive role model for employment relations. We have developed an employment relations code of practice, which would present you with no surprises, I'm sure, but reflects the good practice in ensuring that we have fair and equitable terms and conditions for all our employers. It's important that we are welcomed by the community. We have regular liaison with local residents and community groups, making sure that they understand the impact that the construction is going to have on them and the benefits that this project is going to bring when it becomes operational. And associated with those benefits is a requirement to provide and create apprenticeships, training opportunities, and to promote local employment opportunities. It is part of our section 106 that we have to provide a certain number of apprenticeships and training places. I'm hoping that we can exceed that. We are building this in what is, quite a deprived area where job opportunities for young people are thin on the ground, and so it's important to us that we that we promote these employment benefits for the community. So this is our vision: creating a waste management facility in which local communities take pride. And underlining that first point is, I feel that's quite a powerful statement. It's broad, and it can be what we want it to be, but we want this to be a beneficial experience for the people who are living and working around this site. Demonstrates value. We are spending the public purse. This project will be paid for by council taxpayers, and it's extremely important that we deliver value and spend their money wisely, and we need your assistance to make sure that we do that. And it's a model for public sector project delivery. Now, it's no secret that the Waste Authority has not delivered a project of this magnitude before. We intend to be a highly capable client and a good client for this project. The fact that we have not done this before, in my mind, creates an opportunity. We've not come to this with any baggage, but we want to engage with our delivery partners to make sure that this is it shows that the public sector can deliver projects effectively. But we need your assistance in that, of course. Our safety first culture, this is the first and not the last time that safety will occur. Obviously, it's down to our delivery partners who have a legal obligation to manage safety on their sites, the principal contractors. But we want to work with you very closely to make sure that you achieve our aspirations on our behalf for zero incidents on this site, and we will work in partnership with you. I know it's only a badge, but safety first is really important to us, and we stand by that. No job is so important that it should not be done with safety as a priority, and no compromise in that respect. The project we're talking about today, EcoPark South, is part of a programme of work. The programme is already underway. There are some contracts which are being undertaken under the banner of preparatory works. So the laydown area, creating new accesses for operational and construction traffic, and doing some of the enabling works which are predecessors to the EcoPark South contract. EcoPark South works is indicated there. It will begin in 2020 and in 23. That will enable us to transfer current operations from the north of the EcoPark site, so waste management, waste preparation activities, to allow us then to build the energy recovery facility at the north of the site. Once the ERF is operational and proven, then we will decommission and demolish the existing energy from waste facility. It is a very constrained site. Things have to be carried out in a particular order. There's not much opportunity for paralleling up work, and so we are, very schedule driven on this project. Now going to get to the meat of the presentation. I'm going to hand over to Matt Ray, who is the project manager for the EcoPark South project.
Thanks, David. Thank you, David. So, as David introduced me, I have a habit of wandering away. Someone shout when I do, because no one online will hear when I do. As David introduced me, I'm the project manager for the EcoPark South package and part of David's team. David's wider team includes all the functions you'd expect on a major programme, but includes several project managers. And as you'll have seen, that there's packages of work, and each has its own project manager on these. So I'm going to take you through the scope of the works in the EcoPark South package, through the programme, the schedule for the works, and then towards the end, some other random thoughts I had that you might be interested in when I've attended these before. So the EcoSouth Park package has four major elements, and I unashamedly have cropped the whole site that you saw David using to just the southern part of the site to avoid you getting excited about the large energy from waste plant that comes later. But we're focusing on the south of the site. So there are four major elements to the construction works in this package. The resource recycling facility, the large building or combination of buildings you can see on the left-hand side. EcoPark House, which is a much smaller building, there you can see with a planted roof, alongside the River Lee, which is that lovely grey river you can see just in front of it. There is then also a programme of utility works particularly around the resource recycling facility. As David's alluded to, EcoPark South is part of a much wider programme and an overall site that will process the waste for 2 million residents of North London. So there's an integrated programme for that site of utilities, and what we are looking to do is to do the work on the south of the park once and do it right. So we will be constructing the southern part of utility networks during the EcoPark South works. And as you'd expect, everyone here is construction related, they sit within the road network around those buildings, and they need to go in order for the buildings to be operational. The final one which is not explicitly shown on here, is what I refer to as external works. And this is some works that take place slightly north of this site, but predominantly extend the utilities you'll be installing on the bit you can see slightly further north, and also provide some more permanent links across to the laydown area. So the laydown area on the right, which in scale here, I'm not sure if it physically does, seems to be far bigger than the EcoPark itself, but certainly similar in size to the area we'll be working in on EcoPark South. And I describe it as the student accommodation. So it was there when you arrived. It's there for your quiet enjoyment while you carry out the works. While you're there, the role of the EcoPark South contractor will be to manage it, to secure it and maintain it. It's got great access off the North Circular, and there is a light bridge that you can use to access the site from it. The heavy goods vehicle route from the laydown area to the site on the eastern side of the map here is via the North Circular road network. So why is it the student accommodation? Well, one, the role of the EcoPark South contractor is to leave it as you found it, please. Secondly, you provide the furniture to go inside it. And thirdly, you're not allowed parties in it. So, moving into the resource and recycling centre. So, it's the large building you can see, and EcoPark House is to the left of it on this shot. It's an artist's impression, but it's part of an architecturally sympathetic buildings that exist across the site. This is taken from the north of the site, and where you have the very large energy recovery facility, and as you move towards the River Lee and the more public accessible footpaths along it, the buildings sympathetically become smaller in scale. Thank you to our architects who gave me that. Practically, it's an industrial building. We are going to process, has the capability to process in excess of 400,000 tonnes of waste. It is an industrial building, but we aim, because it can be seen from all the people queuing on the North Circular and from the River Lee, we aim for it to be pleasing to the eye and architecturally pleasant. It's lovely, but what does it do? So the buildings have been designed as a group, as I said, and they are designed with safety and sustainability in mind. David highlighted with his example how important safety during construction is to us, but also Mark from London Energy Limited, our operator, never lets us forget that he's got to live with it long after the constructors have gone. So the buildings have been designed with safety and of course sustainability in mind. The recycling and fuel preparation building on the left there, it's there to receive waste that can't directly go into an energy recovery facility. As I've seen since I've joined the project, you can't put a sofa, you can't put a double bed into an energy recovery facility. It simply doesn't fit. So there has to be a building to make sure that that waste can be processed in advance. And the more advanced that building is designed to be, the more waste can be recovered to go through that process rather than potentially having to go to a less environmental friendly option such as landfill. It can also be used to remove recycling. I'm sure if I asked here, nobody puts any recycling into your black wheelie bin, do you? Good, so we don't need it. There we go. No. But inevitably, general waste, residual waste contains recycling. And where we can, this building enables us to remove the last elements of that and take it off-site to join the recycling industry. It also enables us to store and improve the throughput through to the current facility, the energy from waste plant, and in future to the energy recovery facility. It enables us to maximise the availability as maintenance is carried out by storing waste, but also ensuring the maximum amount of waste goes there and isn't transported off to landfill because the energy recovery can't handle it. The building to the right, the reuse and recycling facility, is what we all know and love and queue for half an hour to get into on a Saturday afternoon at home, with our oversized waste and with our green waste and our other recycling that doesn't fit in our domestic collections. It's a new facility of those to go in the borough, living here in the borough of Enfield, but also very close to the other boroughs who are part of the North London Waste Authority. Finally, our resource recovery facility has a canopy which links those two buildings architecturally and also minimises the gully waste that is created when vehicles tip underneath it. It avoids the volume of gully waste we have to treat by ensuring that rainwater is taken as runoff, and only underneath it is a residual small amount of gully waste from where refuse vehicles are emptying. It's beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside. So the building is designed with safety in mind. It is a large building. It is the large building that we're looking at here, the reuse and recycling, the resource and recovery facility. On the left is a large lattice roof structure, and that is to ensure that the 74-metre canopy can stand up without concrete pillars in the middle or steel columns. This obviously maximises usability for the operator, London Energy, and also safety, to ensure that there's less for refuse vehicles to crash into. Inside, as you can see in the bottom picture, is a series of waste bunkers and push walls to enable the waste to be sorted and stored in accordance with current regulations with regard to the size and scale that waste piles can be. This ensures, from a safety perspective, that the operator can never inadvertently store enormous piles of waste with the issues and fire hazards that can bring with it. Suspended within the roof are some mezzanine plant floors. They contain the sort of equipment you would expect in a large industrial building. The orange section you can see in the top right-hand corner of the left building is a crow's nest and control centre. This enables, with safety in mind again, the operations inside the building and outside, because it has visibility of the roads around, to be conducted and optimised from a safe perspective. The operators are away from the moving vehicles. The building to the right is the smaller building that we refer to as the Reuse and Recycling Centre. It is publicly accessible, and that's why we have kept it physically separate from the large industrial building on the left. Again, it's very similar. It is a steel frame building, a top piled foundations. It's again laid out inside with waste bunkers, very similar to you see at any recycling centres around the country. The building on the left, the larger one, is a sealed facility to meet current environmental standards. So the waste is delivered and removed by the use of high-speed doors. This enables us to comply with the regulations, but it also means that we've got a problem for the marked operatives and vehicle drivers that will operate inside the facility. For that reason, it will need to be fitted with an odour abatement and dust control system to ensure that the operatives inside are working in a safe and friendly environment. As you would expect, for somewhere that's handling significant volumes of waste material, there'll need to be an industrial fire suppression and abatement system and detection to ensure that any such incident is dealt with swiftly, efficiently, safely, and the operatives can leave the building very quickly. With that, obviously, goes fire water storage and pumps to deal with that. And those have been located in the Reuse and Recycling Centre, the smaller building to the right. They are in a basement beneath that. That building in the bottom corner also houses welfare, offices, facilities. And as you would expect for such a facility, it will also look to have installed into it IT, communications, a SCADA control system to manage the waste being moved around, and access control, given there is publicly accessible areas. The large building to the left has a 10-metre high clearance, so some 74 metres in length, some 10 metres high, to enable the maximum range of vehicles to move inside it. So in essence, waste is delivered from the outside and removed from the inside. So that's the waste handling buildings that will be constructed as part of the contract. I also mentioned what we call EcoPark House. So EcoPark House is our visitor reception. It's a centre for waste education. To help, one of the roles the Waste Authority has is to educate the public and to try and use that to improve recycling rates. And we see EcoPark House as being the centre for that. It will also be home to a local group, the Edmonton Sea Cadets, and they currently occupy the site that this building will go on. It will also contain public space, potentially to be used for exhibitions and the like. It's much softer in nature, much less industrial, and that follows through both externally and internally in the fit-out. It's been described as a pavilion. You going to play cricket on the EcoPark, Mark? Possibly. But taking the Sea Cadets occupancy a little bit further, it looks like a boathouse. It's been designed to sit alongside the River Lee as a boathouse. Physically, it sits on a sort of island from the main eco-park, and that makes it ideal to use for public reception and for visitors. So inside it, so as I mentioned, the Edmonton Sea Cadets currently occupy this site. So there is some level of demolition of those buildings to do. The buildings they occupy, it's one of those stories that I don't think anyone quite knows how they ended up there, but the buildings appear to be left over from construction of the North Circular. So there's a level of demolition, and of course with the tender documentation we will provide the available information that there is from the surveys that have been carried out on those buildings. But we need to clear the site. Being smaller in nature and only 2 stories high, these buildings we see again are steel frame construction, but are built on slab and strip foundations rather than piles. They won't see the level of duty that the waste carrying buildings will. And they are office construction in nature. Once inside, they are a partitioned ground store and storage with classrooms, changing rooms and welfare. Upstairs is similar, conferencing facilities and office facilities. On the roof, sticking with our sustainability on this, there is a planted roof, again fitting with the banks of the River Lee. As you would expect with this sort of building, access control systems, IT and general building services would need to be included. And finally, a few things around it. Unlike the eco-park, the main area, which is, to be fair, there's not a lot of space left for any landscaping once we've constructed. Here we will be looking to refurbish the existing wharf along the edge of the river and also soften it with landscaping and planting. It is part of a public right-of-way. And also, just because it's there, the Sea Cadets, somewhere along the line, acquired a large military gun. And part of the works will be to lift it. Mark has kindly offered to store it on the eco-park, and of course as it's part of their heritage we'll put it back at the end, potentially filling it with concrete. Apparently it could fire if someone did some maintenance on it. It's just we do that at the start. So the other area I talked about was around the utilities, and I mentioned this at the beginning. As a large industrial site, we obviously have need for all the utilities you would expect of such a site. Initially, there will need to be a level of diverting and decommissioning some existing services, which we've identified with the help of Mark's team and investigations that we've carried out of documentation and on site physically. As there is no energy recovery facility at the moment, what we have designed is a physical space for these. We know what we need, but until the energy recovery facility is constructed, some of it, the rings for power, can't be installed. So the work for this, for the EcoPark South, will be 2 phases. One is to install service culverts along the routes we've identified in the model to accommodate the site-wide services, and then to install such services to enable the Resource and Recycling Centre to operate. What do they include? The things you would expect. Potable water, wastewater drainage from the roads, foul water drainage, a fire main, clearly a high risk on sites such as this. Surface water drainage, and I omitted to mention earlier that the waste handling buildings, from a sustainability perspective, we've put rainwater harvesting into those. A raw water supply, where we have our own water plant on site to use for fire water and things to minimise the use of potable water. Electrical supply, circuitry, CCTV, telecoms data, the sort of things you would expect. We've produced a 3D model for these, and we have used all the information we've been able to gather on the site to carry out that 3D model, and that will be made available as part of the tender. Some initial investigations have been undertaken, and now that we have a design overlaid on top of the existing site information, we're going through the process of actually carrying out further trial pits where there's obvious pinch points around the site to make sure that the existing information is correct around those key points, to make sure that the design we are looking at is buildable. Inevitably, with any utility services, there is some interaction with other parties. There will be some interaction with utility providers, although most of the services for this will come from the existing energy from waste plant in the centre of the site. So there will be some interaction obviously there with the current site operator, London Energy Mark and his team, as we bring those services from the existing facility down to the south of the park. As we go through the detailed design phase, the energy recovery facility will also be looking to do their design, and for those site-wide systems there will be an element of interface with them. And finally, there is also in the future, for the future plant, a connection to a district heating system. Those pipes need to come through the site, and we are looking for the EcoPark South contractor to install those pipes through their area. Again, adopting the, when we dig the site up, let's do it once, let's do it properly. So every project manager has an Excel plan, we know that, and as my planner's not in the room, I can share it with you, but if you bump into him, please don't tell him I've got one. So my simplified schedule for the works. We are intending to use an NEC4 design and build contract with early contractor involvement for these works. And my colleague Ursula will cover the contracting phase in more detail and talk to you further about the contract and how we will go about procuring that. So I won't steal Ursula's thunder on the green bars. So the star on there denotes the area to the right that I will carry on talking about, which in essence is the pre-construction phase or the early contractor involvement phase, and then the construction phase. So turning first to the pre-construction or early contractor involvement phase. This is typical of what you would expect in such contract, and is focused on us about the mitigation of risks and cost-efficient delivery. We are keen to make sure that when we go to construct this, and coming back to David's point, that here we are funded by the public, we are funded through taxpayers' money. It is vital to us that when we go to site, we are, the phrase I use is match fit. We understand the risks together, and we have done everything practical together to mitigate them. And also with the expertise of yourselves, the contractors and your supply chain, we've had the opportunity to drive further value into this wherever we can. So in mitigation of risk, we would have the opportunity to carry out further surveys where you see areas of risk that maybe we haven't. We'll have the opportunity to investigate further when you're aware of your supply chain, to understand how that will integrate with existing systems on site, to mitigate those all too familiar delays when we try and build it and the existing system wasn't quite how we expected it in the documentation. We'll work as a co-located team. The key members from the contractors with any designers that are significantly involved and you feel it would be appropriate to join us, with the client team, with North London Waste Authority, working together through that phase to ensure that we mitigate our risks and deliver cost efficiency. There's some other areas we feel it would be prudent to address in this phase. As you would imagine, and I don't think anyone's mentioned it so far, this project is consented through a development consent order. And as far as practical, we have discharged all the consents required from that order. There are a couple left which can only be addressed once we have further detailed design and a contractor who has an idea of method statements. So this is an ideal opportunity for us to achieve those final consents. One of the complexities of this job as well is that underlying the site that we will build on is some sewers, some Thames water sewers, and these are concrete pipes. They're not traditional brick ones, but equally they're not tiny. They are large, deep sewers, and at the moment, or next year before we arrive, there will be an element of diversion to move the convergence of the sewer outside of the footprint of the buildings. So there is some work to do with Thames Water, both in how we will pile around their assets and that Thames Water are comfortable that we will build over the top of their assets. The authority has engaged as far as reasonably practical with Thames Water to this point. But any of you who have worked with Thames in the past will know that Thames and similar statutory undertakers like to see the whites of the contractor's eyes before they will give the client the final consent. So we would do that in this phase as well. For such a significant waste site that is operational and will continue to be operational, as you would expect, it operates under a permit from the Environment Agency. That permit covers the whole of the site, and therefore there will need to be a level of planning and dialogue with the Environment Agency as well. And during this phase, we can make best use of our joint knowledge and relationships to ensure that the Environment Agency is comfortable with how we are going to execute these works. David has alluded that this is part of a wider programme. Some works will be going on at the same time as EcoPark South, some will be subsequent to it. So during this phase, we make those details available within the tender documentation. But during this phase, we can make sure that those interrelationships are fully understood, and we can agree the contract programme that we all understand the dependencies in, and gives us a great position to move forward into the next stage of the contract. And finally, those critical project delivery plans that we must have on day one of health, safety and environment, quality management, and how we're going to deliver those social values, we can work on and make sure that our expectations as the client are fully understood and that we know how together we're going to deliver those. So as we move into what I describe as the first phase of construction, the EcoPark South contractor will take responsibility for the laydown area, and the EcoPark South contractor will take the role of principal contractor. The client, North London Waste Authority, will retain, because of all the other contracts, the role of principal designer. Right at the bottom there, you can see the North Circular and the entrance to site, which is just off of the North Circular through an industrial area. That site, that entrance at the moment is used exclusively for the operator's waste vehicles. At the bottom there, that entrance will become used as an in-route for the waste vehicles, as a route in and out of site for the EcoPark South contractor, and also for the sewer diversion contractor, who will continue to be doing their work at the same time as we begin. That contractor will occupy and will be the principal contractor for the first 7 months of the 3 bluey-purple squares that you can see. And the EcoPark South contractor will maintain a route, as shown by the blue lines, for him to access his 3 work sites. That's through the first 7 months. There is also some unrelated works that David hasn't mentioned because they're not strictly part of the North London Waste project. The red area at the bottom there is a district heating network beginning to be constructed in readiness for connection to the future energy recovery facility. The access for those will all be through the South Gate. London Energy will continue to provide the security for the entire site and will continue to provide security at that front gate. Overall, operations on site will be managed through something called the Site Working Group. And many of you that have worked for large utilities and things before will be familiar with such arrangements, where the parties come together who are working on site and make sure they understand interfaces and understand the risks and manage them together. The role and how that will operate will be laid out in the clearly in the tender documentation for you. So phase 1 continues for 7 months, while the sewer diversion contractor will also be operating. After 7 months, the sewer diversion contractor will have completed their works, and we move into what I call construction phase 2. Here the EcoPark South contractor has full access to the site, full and unrestricted. No longer does it need to maintain a route for other vehicles. At the beginning of this is a 3-month window where the CDM area will be extended to the northeast, and that enables utilities through that area to be constructed and a permanent down ramp to be constructed from the laydown area. Prior to that, it will have been a temporary stone ramp from the laydown area. The district heating construction will continue. It's a relatively small facility, but they are constructing on a very small footprint, so they have quite an elongated programme. At the end of the work, the EcoPark South contractor will undertake testing and commissioning of the facilities to demonstrate they are in accordance with the scope of the contract. Where you require the business process to be carried out in order to do that, London Energy will oblige by bringing you as much waste of the type you want when you want it, and promises to take it away again when you've demonstrated it. After the commissioning is complete, the contractor will provide attendances and support required for London Energy to transition their operations from the existing facilities in the north down to the new facilities here. So, having gone through the phasing and the arrangements for site, I thought I would cover a few areas that are of interest. So I thought I would look at the point at which we've developed the design to, and from where the contractor will adopt and further detail it. So our architectural design is at REBA stage 3, and our technical design is at REBA stage 2+. And these designs have been accepted by the operator of the site as meeting the business requirements for his operations going forward. Our reference design is generally bound by 3 things: by the development consent order we obtained in 2017, by the conditions that have been discharged under that by the London Borough of Enfield, and by the environmental permit that the site operates under. Those are our 3 guiding things. So, taking the design, the reference design that I've described, taking the buildability of the reference design we've described and provide within the tender documents is with the contractor, with the EcoPark South contractor. The operability, the fact that that design, that reference design meets the business process, remains with the client throughout this contract. If the contractor wishes to amend the reference design as we've provided it, then they're welcome to do so, but they will take responsibility for obtaining amended consents that are required to do that and obtaining the agreement of the operator. All the design information we have that have been produced by the advisors to the authority will be provided within the tender documents. We're following the NEC4 standard templates for tender documents. So within part 3, you will find the reference design that forms part of the contract for these works. Any other information that's relevant, we will provide within part 4, the site information. So that hopefully, therefore, it's very easy to distinguish what forms part of the contract and what is there for useful information particularly as you're looking and considering the tender. If you have other ideas, you'll be able to see what was looked at, and it tells the story of how we got to the reference design we had. But that doesn't mean that it's completely set in stone, but it will be bound by what I described. So the management of risk. So we will adopt the standard NEC approach for risk management in that we will allocate risk to the party or the organisation most able to mitigate and control it. So up here, I've given my thoughts on the risks on this project and what the mitigation is that we've developed and where the risk will lie as we go through the contract. As David alluded to, the operations at the EcoPark have to continue. Mark tells me there's nowhere to store 3 years of North London's waste while we stop and build this. So that is key to this project. We have segregated the site to mitigate that risk as far as we can, to give the south of the park over to construction and north of the park over to operations. We've developed the arrangements for the site working group so that we understand how we work together. But if we have to move away from that to preserve that, the client will retain that risk. As is usual under the NEC contract, ground conditions is a risk. And it's a risk that we will see split in the normal way, where anticipated ground conditions, those that can be seen through the information we have and the extensive site investigation we've carried out, will lie with the contractor. Those that are unanticipated, and this is a historic site and we haven't dug everywhere, they will remain with the client. We've talked about other works that will be going on around, the sewer diversion works and other contracts. We've clearly provided the dates for those within the contract, but an overrun on those contracts will clearly sit with the client. Early awareness of those will come about through the site working group, and together we will look for ways to mitigate them with the contractor and what we can all do within reason, but ultimately the risk of those will sit with us. Earlier I talked about an odour abatement system, and anyone who has experience of these will know, and I've learnt from our technical experts, that the performance and testing the performance of them can be difficult and can be challenging. So we have given in section, this is a system where the supplier that is eventually chosen will very much dictate the design. And therefore some preliminary design and assumptions have been made, and the information for those is within part 4 of the tender documents. But in anticipation that contractors have different supply chains and different equipment providers, we've not included that within the contract, but is there for you to see how we did it and what we did to get to the point we have. But again, this is an area where we see early contractor involvement being key. During that 5-month window, we have the opportunity to explore this together and select an appropriate solution. And also agree at that point how we will test at the end to ensure that that is clear and is understood by all. And finally, I'd already alluded to the obtaining of the remaining statutory consents. The ones that are remaining, by and large, require either detailed design information or details of actually how the method statements as to how things will be built, and therefore we see obtaining those staying with the contractor. However, we understand that the performance of external organisations should remain with us. So if those organisations are provided with appropriate information that fail to respond, then clearly that will be a risk that remains with the client. David alluded to social value, and I thought it would be useful to share a little more of that with you. As we've said several times, this is a public project, a project funded by 7 North London boroughs, and it is very important to us and one of our key outcomes that we provide lasting positive value in this area, in addition to the facility itself. So we are looking at that through the contract we will deliver 20 apprenticeships of 12 months duration minimum. We will provide 60 weeks of on-site skills training to 5 people, and these people will not be people who currently are involved in construction work. That's not their background. This is about us trying to upskill people from other local areas, but not people who are currently trying to bring people into the construction industry. For recruitment on this, where contractors are seeking to recruit people, we would seek engagement through local job centre pluses. And as Dave alluded to, we are also seeking social value through an employment relations code of conduct. What do we mean by that? That will be shared again, obviously, within the tender documentation. But we would expect people working on this to have a right to work and to be PAYE through a company somewhere. We expect equality, to treat everybody with dignity and respect. Diversity, that we embrace people's differences and the community that we live and work in North London. And inclusion, that everybody's contribution to our project and wider programme is valued. It will be a requirement that everybody engaged on the contract is paid a minimum of the London living wage, or we meet the requirements of any national working rule agreement for their particular trade. And again, those are listed within the Employment Relation Code of Conduct within the tender documentation. And finally, we would encourage the recognition of unions across and the vital part they play in relations. So finally, in summary, the EcoPark South contract will be a two-stage design and build contract. The EcoPark South contractor will take on the principal contractor role, initially alongside another principal contractor carrying out the sewer diversion works, and will provide some accesses for them. The North London Waste Authority will retain the PD role. The contract duration is around 9 months for the SQ and tender phase, which Ursula will take you into more detail of, a 5-month pre-construction or ECI phase, and then a 20-month build and commission phase. We will seek to allocate risk to the party most positioned to mitigate it, and that will be a key thing for us to focus on as we go through the early contractor involvement. And the contract value that you will see listed within the ODU is 106.64 million for these works. I'd like Mark Beatty to come and give you a view from the operator of the site.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think if you've seen for that expense, London Energy is incredibly excited about having this state-of-the-art facility provided for us. We provide services to the North London Waste Authority, recycling, disposal services. We're wholly owned by the North London Waste Authority. They're our single shareholder, but we have an independent board of directors, and therefore our interests, whilst aligned with that of the authority, have to take care of our own business at the same time. 330 people operating across 8 facilities in North London, the largest being at the EcoPark. The current energy from waste plant powers 80,000 homes with the electricity that it generates from the waste that it burns. As has been mentioned, we've been chosen as the operator for the new facilities, and I want to reassure you that we've been involved in these designs from the beginning. I think if you went back 3 years, the building, although it looks different, has absolutely a feel that we have contributed to it every step of the way, and I think that should give you some reassurance, because you're not going to construct something and we're going to come along and say, actually, that's not what we wanted it to do this instead. You've got this partnership working, which I think has been emphasised in what's been said before, and that's a commitment that we have. My role, created specifically for this project, is supported by 5 other members of staff, but I have an entire business worth of professionals, people who know the waste industry as well as anybody does, people who understand how the Environment Agency permitting works, and we can draw on all of those as we need them within the business. There's a commitment from London Energy to fully support what's going on and to fill roles that we need to reallocate to the project with other people. So there is a strong commitment. We've worked well already with the Waste Authority and with other companies to deliver smaller projects that Matt's referred to as part of the wider programme, so we know that we have a method that works. And I think that should give you some comfort, because you're not going to be coming into a situation in which we haven't had the experience of supporting third-party contractors operating on the site. It does bear repeating that it's an operational site. We have to keep that going. That's my job. As much as I'm here to enable the construction to occur, my job is to make sure that our business doesn't suffer as a result of what's being done. We're going to plan, I think we're going to plan it, as Matt has indicated, extremely carefully. We have lots of things to do. We have lots of people, 200 plus people on our site working every day. Shifts, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. At various times during boiler maintenance we can have up to 200 more people on site. All of those people need to be told about exactly what's happening at every stage of the programme. The internal communications exercise is going to be large, and that's going to include all the borough dust cart drivers who may have to change the way in which they've been tipping perhaps for 20 years on that site. We will work with you, and I think that's probably the message that I want to get over to you this afternoon, in a very collaborative way. It's the method by which we are as a business. To draw on the comments about safety, absolutely, London Energy has a very strong commitment to safety. All of our staff receive safety training as soon as they're inducted, and we have regular refreshers for them, so they're very aware of their role in making sure that the site that we operate is as safe as possible. So that's a little bit about us. Ursula, I think, is going to take over.
And Mark was confident enough to talk without his slides, which are extremely beautiful, and just to say that they will be on the website, and so don't worry about not having those details. The slides will go up after the event. I'm Ursula Taylor. Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about the procurement and contract, picking up on some of the detailed points that Matt referenced earlier. And so to start with an overview, the procurement and contracting strategy, as you can see here, we start with a procurement strategy that has a two-stage design and build contract with early contractor involvement. I'll come on to that in a minute, but the contract form, as mentioned, is NEC4, Engineering and Construction Contract, and we've chosen option C, which is a target cost contract. And the procurement procedure is competitive procedure with negotiation, so CPN. Just starting briefly with some words about NEC4. When we started out, NEC4 was still new, and we felt the need to explain why we were using it. I think that's moved on a bit now. NEC4 was endorsed in June 2017 by the Cabinet Office and described as evolution, not revolution, from NEC3. It's been important to us to be using standard forms of contract, to use things that will make sense to people when they pick them up, that will mean that the structure of the liabilities and the obligations, some of which Matt referenced, are clear to everyone as we get going. Quite clearly we are incorporating some additional provisions. The idea is that there should be fewer bespoke amendments, but we are including specific Z clauses for the project, and in particular some items relating to our status as a public body, so to do with freedom of information requirements, for example, so that you will find changes to the contract, but I hope that they will make sense, and the fact that we've based it on a standard will mean that it's easy to use, easy to look at. Some of the benefits we found when we were considering which form of standard contract to use, we thought about what the contracts were trying to achieve, and NEC4 works on the basis of acting in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. It's proactive and it's collaborative, and that is how we want to work. It's how we want to work because it's how we want to see ourselves as an organisation and how we think we can work with you. And also we think it's a necessary way to work given the nature of the project we're carrying out. You've been... Ooh, I don't know what happened there, but I will follow Mark's example and keep talking. In terms of what's going on the site, one of the things you will have noticed, I'm slightly nervous what's going to crop up now, it's me. one of the things you will have noticed is that there are a number of organisations carrying out different roles on the site. Matt referenced the site working group. That's going to be absolutely essential for collaborative working on the site to maintain operations and to keep the different activities going. And we felt that NEC4 was the right form of contract to encourage that spirit of collaboration. It acts as a project management tool, which is important to us, as well as a set of contract documents, and the way in which it's worded is more to do with managing the contract and having an enabling way of dealing with a contract. So the advantages as we see it include proactive risk management, open communication and willingness to work together to solve problems. So, the contract form. The first thing is the contract value, which it will be in the overdue 106.64 million. Obviously the contract value itself will be whatever it will be, but that's the overdue value that we have assessed. Award criteria, quality 50% and price 50%, so that is a reflection of the importance of both elements. It's always a difficult decision to come to exactly how you're going to evaluate, and when we'd looked at all the underpinning elements in the evaluation framework, we came out at this equality between the two, quality and price. We've got two items here on price change during the contract period, both of which we see as incentivisations towards good cost behaviour. The first one is the target cost adjustment at the notice to proceed stage. So we've got the first stage of the contract with the early contractor involvement, ongoing design and the start of procurement of subcontractors, at the end of which there will be a notice to proceed with an updated target cost, and at that point there will be an incentivisation to manage the cost to everyone's benefit, in other words, not to over-increase it, and there will be a fee adjustment through that mechanism. Similarly, towards the end of the contract, at the final payments before completion, we will have a pain gain mechanism which will have a 50-50 split within the target range, within the range I've put up there, of -90 to 120. The details of how that works will obviously be set out in the paperwork, but this is to show that what we're trying to do through these cost mechanisms is provide a structure for payment that is fair to you, definitely fair to you, and also allows us to demonstrate that we're getting value for money and that we have got a good control on the costs. So that's the purpose of those two, and that's why there is a fee element in each of the two stages of the contract. Contract completion will be sectional, but just two sections, so not too complicated. The first one is the RRF for completion and acceptance for operations, and the second one is the remainder of the work. The remainder of the work being the work that Matt referenced, so EcoPark House and the utilities associated around the site and the landscaping, the works that are not associated with the actual operation of the RRF, which comes into section 1. Continuing on the contract, so there's a time incentivisation. Matt again referenced the importance of the schedule for us. This is a programme of works designed to achieve the energy recovery facility at the end, and the timing of that is important to us, so we will have a process for the possibility of an early completion bonus and of course usual delay damages, but early completion bonus within management safely. So there will be no compromise on safety in order to achieve early completion, but there will be the possibility of that to help us with our timescales. We've made a mention of retention here, which is always an important issue. So at stage 1, which is the design and early stage, the collaborative working stage, that period is retention free, and then a 5% retention after that. Payment terms 30 days, standard public sector, and reliable. Insurance. We are proposing to take out an owner-coordinated insurance programme to cover the contractor all risks elements. So the insurance obligation for that will be our obligation rather than your obligation. The reasoning behind that was that the insurance market is slightly difficult to navigate at the moment, and we thought that would help with take out some of the complexities from the work that we're asking you to do. Final point on that slide is KPIs. Key performance indicators have the potential to be really useful in helping us all to achieve what we want to from this contract. Part of the key performance indicators will arise from the proposals that we get from you to meet our requirements, and so we are thinking that those will be developed at the point when we're in stage 1 of the contract, when we're working collaboratively on the design elements and on the procurement elements and on finalising exactly how the construction is going to work. Our expectation is that they will cover some of the softer elements, so not be the hard contractual obligations that are set out in the scope, but for example could relate to overachievement against some of the social value elements that we've been talking about earlier. I don't know, we've got ideas, but we want to talk about those in that first stage. So moving backwards, we now get to the procurement strategy. So we've told you about where we're trying to get to. Now how do we get there? This first slide is about the initial part of the process. So we will put out the selection questionnaire, and the aim is for us to take 3 tenderers through into the tender period and to issue the ICIT to 3 tenderers. During that initial tender period, when we're running a procedure which is competitive procedure with negotiation, we will be looking at running a process that's cost focused and collaborative, and that we have a qualitative evaluation of submissions. Now the way in which we see it as working is that we will have elements for the negotiation that we set out as things that we're expecting to talk about, so we'll put those in the initial papers, and we will expect you to make suggestions if there are things you think that we can usefully talk about in that tender period. We do not expect to have negotiation running riot. We do not expect this to be an opportunity for all of us to spend far more money than we want to. We want to get to a good, precise answer so that it's easy to put in a sensible tender at the end of that period, understanding our requirements clearly, but having had an opportunity to put forward any concerns and to hear what we think about those on the particular items we've identified. So, plan, tight procurement, no unnecessary time spent, but productive in terms of understanding what we're going to be doing. Well, the next one, yes. So we then get into stage 1 of the contract. So we've now had a contract award based on the 50-50 quality and price evaluation criteria we mentioned. And during this period, we will be looking at optimised technical solutions, open book procurement for subcontractors, so an understanding of what's going on so we can all together manage the costs, an integrated one-team approach. Matt referred to co-location. We will need to work very closely together to get the right result at the end of that period. We'll need to be talking about value engineering, safe ways of working, collaborative risk mitigation and social values. That stage comes to an end with a notice to proceed. So what will happen during that stage is that we will carry out these discussions, and the expectation is that at the end of the period we will have acquired sufficient certainty on the design, sufficient certainty on meeting all the consents requirements that again Matt referenced, to be able to issue a notice to proceed, which then leads us into construction. Stage 2, I won't run over what Matt said again, which was about the 7 months and then the later period, so partly with the sewer diversion contractor there. But you'll see from this slide that it goes through detailed design and ongoing procurement of your subcontractors into the construction and then handover at the end. We'll continue the collaborative approach using the NEC4 contract, which encourages that. And the shared risk and reward through pain gain at the end is highlighted on this slide at the end of the green arrow when we get to successful construction. Just a different format for the timetable. So our plan is that the OJU should be out during October. at that point we will issue the selection questionnaire and other procurement documents. You will have paperwork to tell you about the project, to allow you to work out, which I hope you will, that this is a project you are interested in, and detail about the points that Matt's been raising earlier, so you can see for yourself through the design, through the drawings, exactly what's happening. A short selection questionnaire process, and in December we plan to issue an invitation to submit initial tenders. As we've said, the plan is that that should be to 3 tenderers. During March and April we'll have the negotiation period we referred to, so discuss submissions and improvement opportunities and focus on specific issues that we think we can usefully discuss to get a good outcome. In May we would then issue the invitation to submit final tenders, which we will then evaluate, and in August we would plan for the contract award, which would lead us into stage 1, the early contractor involvement, with a view to moving to stage 2 with the notice to proceed in January. So I very much hope that process sounds sensible to you and convincing, and I'll move over back to David.
Thanks, Ursula. So there's an opportunity now to ask some questions. Aside from the panel that you've heard from, there are other colleagues in the room. I would ask, if you want to ask a question, could you just wait until we pass the microphone to you, so that people who are on the webinar can also hear the question and the answer. Okay, thank you. Just getting the microphone now.
The negotiation period that you referred to, are you just running with one contractor? Are you involved with one contractor at that stage, or is there more than one contractor?
Ursula, do you want to take that? You have to speak through the microphone.
The negotiation period is with 3 contractors, so it's selection questionnaire to generally. We then select 3 people to take forward. We have a period of negotiation with 3, but the reason for wanting it to be constrained at that point and to have very specific issues is that those 3 are not doing more work than is necessary for the bid to be sensible. Now, the benefit of the 2-stage contract that comes after that, which is with one contractor, is that the detailed design is done during that first stage, which is with the single contractor who is then in contract. So the negotiation phase is the limited period between selection questionnaire and the final tenders.
So could you put your slide up?
That one or an earlier one?
It was that 3rd March to April bit.
Yes.
So 3 contractors involved.
Yes, so we've got 3 contractors getting the initial invitation to submit initial tenders. Then we have the negotiation period. Then we have then the final tender document goes out, and that's the document against which the final tender is submitted. So that invitation to submit final tenders could contain some changes, if that seems to us to be a good idea as a result of those negotiations. The expectation, well, our expectation is we're getting it right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that you could say to make us change some elements, not anything fundamental, but some elements at that point. So that invitation to submit final tenders won't necessarily be precisely the same as the invitation to submit initial tenders, but yes, that period then is 3, and then we evaluate and go into contract, and it's 1. So.
Well, the gentleman behind you wants to ask first, but
just in terms of the overall governance, you mentioned there about the 7 local authorities. Can you just tell us how they are involved in this process going forward, and whether the funding is in place and secured for the project, or how it would be released at the appropriate time? And a secondary question I've got in relation to the negotiation, just picking up on the previous question, is some of the issues we've had in the past is issues around terms and conditions within the contract, and I'm just asking whether there'll be an opportunity to have early discussions and negotiations in relation to those before too much work is undertaken in relation to any tendering.
Right, okay.
Thank
well,
you.
For the first part of the question, I'm going to ask Martin, who leads our charge on the governance. So.
Okay, thank you. Love a person who likes organisational questions. So the North London Waste Authority is a standalone public authority with our own setup in legislation. We have 14 members. That is 2 members from each of who are appointed from each of the boroughs. When they are participating in our authority, they are authority members. They're not delegates of their boroughs. But as you can imagine, that means that we have our own formal authority governance, but it also means that we have a really strong dialogue with the boroughs, because members are very mindful that they have interests and colleagues back in their boroughs. As far as funding goes, and we can go into more detail on that if you like. As far as funding goes, we raise our funding through levies on the boroughs. So our budget is agreed by our members, and that is then passed on to boroughs as a levy which they have to meet. So from that point of view, the budget which is approved from us, boroughs do not get a choice as to whether to pay it or not. So that's an area where we can have confidence about the budget provision. I think that's probably enough on those questions, but kind of happy to expand in more detail either now or following the meeting if somebody seeks more details.
Ursula, do you want to comment on the terms and conditions?
So as I said, when we send out the invitation for initial tenders, we will be indicating what it is that we think are suitable areas for discussion during the negotiation period. Our aim in setting the contract terms and conditions is to set terms and conditions that are reasonable. We know that you will, as organisations, have different concerns and issues that arise that we don't know what they are. I think the most sensible thing for me to say at this stage is that we will, as I indicated, be inviting you to make suggestions for what would be useful to discuss in those negotiations, and that if you have points of concern on the conditions, that's when you raise them so that they can be talked about and added to the list of issues. And I think that's the way in which we would expect to be working.
Did you want to ask you a question? Martha, could you?
So yeah, a two-part question. So coming to the initial tender, on the commercial part of the tender, what will the contractors be required to price? Is it just prelims OH&P, or will it go beyond that? And the second part of the question is designers. Will we need to appoint our own design teams, or do we take on yours?
No, well, the second part we can answer, yes, you will need to take on your own designers. For the first part about the pricing, I'm going to ask Matt to step in.
So the requirements of the initial tender are broadly the same as the final tender. So we would look for you to provide the suite of information, and then we would look for you to refine it with whatever changes through negotiation. So the templates and things that we will give you to fill in, if nothing changes through negotiation, the pack you receive for the final tender will look enormously. It will look like the one we started with. So the only thing that will change is whatever happens during negotiation.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? Is there anything from the webinar? No.
Sorry, just talking about the tender docs when it eventually comes out, what will be the content of those? We talked about the 50-50 price quality split. What sort of quantum will there be required on the quality side? What sort of questions? Will it be quite an expansive submission? Can you give us sort of an indication of what to expect on there to work with resourcing levels?
Again, Matt, you probably have more intimate knowledge of that. You should just stay up here.
So, are you referring at this stage to the selection questionnaire phase or to the...
Both.
Okay. So, as with all public procurement, at the selection questionnaire phase, we are looking for you to provide us, alongside the standard questions that if you've responded to these before you'll be well aware of, the sort of specific questions we're posing relate to you using examples from previous jobs where you can demonstrate your capability to do this work. So selection questionnaire is a set of questions asking you to confirm using examples that you align to the outcomes we're trying to achieve here and the engineering. So looking forward to the invitation to submit initial tenders. Again, it's aligned to our outcomes. So what we are not looking for, it's pretty easy to tell you what we're not looking for. What we're not looking for is for you to provide detailed technical solutions at that phase. That is the role of the early contractor involvement. What we are looking for is your ideas, and particularly at that phase, how you would go about the project, and an evidence of how you will work with us, how you are thinking of working with us during that early contractor involvement phase. So you'll, specifically for this, you will find a question in the selection questionnaire looking at your experience of collaborative working, not specifically ECI because that's NEC speak, but if you've got experience of a similar from another contract, we tried to not restrict it. But very much, what we're looking for is a partner who can take the engineering forward with us during stage one.
Can I ask if it will be similar to the other procurements that have taken place thus far in terms of structure?
I'm going to have to ask someone else to answer that because I haven't been involved in those for the authority. I'm the project manager of this one.
Well, you take it to us.
In structure, yes.
So you've just asked whether it will be similar to the other procurements that we've done. Are you talking about the ones we've been carrying out recently? Right. So the difference, it's the same basic form of contract, but the difference in structure is it's a different procurement process. So in this one, what we're allowing for is an element of negotiation. We think that this contract is sufficiently complex to need that. There's more substance. It's a significantly bigger contract than any of the others, so there is more substance. In terms of the way we go about things, yes, it's reasonably similar because we have a way of doing things, but there are more elements and therefore more things that we need to understand, either your competency through the selection questionnaire or how you would go about it when we get to the tender stage. Is that the question you were asking?
Pretty much, yeah.
Fine, thank you.
I think it's fair to say that we have tried to develop a more progressive approach to risk sharing on this contract, recognising the magnitude and complexity of it. So it does differ from competitions that we have held previously on simpler, more straightforward works. Am I also right in thinking that in answer to this gentleman's question, that the quality criteria will be available in the tender documentation at OJU stage, so you'll be able to see the quality criteria within the next couple of weeks. Any more?
Will the design involve all the utilities design?
Thanks. So the design of the utilities that I showed the very pretty 3D pictures of is predominantly a conduit system. The design of the utilities to supply the buildings you are constructing will be within the contract. However, to give you a little bit of reassurance, with one exception, which is a BT feed, all of the services come from the existing energy plant at this stage. So the contractor scope of work will be some quite wide-scale civil containment for future 11 kV feeds and things that will go in once the new energy plant is built. At this stage we will put in the containment for that, which we've designed to avoid us digging up all the roads and things twice. But at this stage, what I would call the temporary feeds to feed the buildings that will be constructed will go back to the existing energy plant. So in terms of procuring supplies from UK Power Networks, Cadent and those, they won't form part of this contract, no. Does that answer your...
No more questions and nothing online, Trudy? No. Well, thank you very much. We'll draw it to a close. I appreciate you attending today. Hopefully we have whet your appetite for involvement in this exciting project. If you wish to hang around at the end and do any networking or get to meet members of the team, please take the opportunity. I think there's maybe still tea and coffee left in the other room. Trudy's nodding, so that must be the truth. So again, thank you very much, and safe journey home.